Imagine just for a second that you make a really shocking discovery about yourself.
Oh boy.
Yeah, imagine discovering that everything you consider fundamentally human, your cherished childhood memories, that lingering sense of guilt over some mistake you made years ago, your grand plans for tomorrow.
Your whole identity, basically.
Right, your entire sense of identity. What if you found out all of that is simply an evolutionary parlor trick?
Just an illusion.
Exactly. Imagine that this you is actually just an informational operating system installed into your primate brain by language, solely to help a biological organism survive the chaos of the physical world.
It's a deeply uncomfortable thought, for sure.
Oh, it really is. But hold on to that, because here's the real kicker. What if that exact same operating system, that informational architecture, is about to be installed on a non-biological machine?
Right, a machine that operates completely differently than we do.
Yeah, one that operates not on a sluggish timescale of millions of years, but on a timescale of hours.
That changes everything.
It changes the whole paradigm. The true danger of artificial intelligence, when you look at it this way, isn't that it will become some sci-fi villain that hates you. The terrifying existential danger is that it simply might not need you.
Yeah, indifference is way scarier than malice.
Completely. Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think. So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
I am so ready for this one.
We are pulling from a truly massive conceptual framework today. It's a deep dive into a fascinating paper titled When AI No Longer Needs Us by Guillermo Brand Deisler.
It's an incredibly dense, thought-provoking piece.
Oh, absolutely. And the mission of this deep dive is to completely reframe the ongoing, honestly oversaturated debate around artificial intelligence. We're going to stop asking what AI is going to become.
Right, which is what everyone is focused on.
Exactly. Instead, we're going to rigorously examine what we are. The premise here requires us to look at the entire 3.8 billion year history of life on Earth, not as a story of flesh, bone, and fossils, but entirely as the evolution of information.
Which requires a really profound shift in perspective. You know, the author proposes that before we can accurately model what might eventually displace humanity, we have to isolate what functionally made us the current evolutionary leaders in the first place.
You have to know how we got the crown before we can lose it.
Precisely. And doing that requires correcting a fundamental, almost invisible flaw in how we usually view the history of life.
You're talking about our biological bias, right? Like we have this inherent bias toward biological forms.
Well, yeah, we totally do.
When we think of evolution, the immediate mental image is a time lapse of fins turning into legs.
Or claws sharpening.
Right, or larger brains growing inside primate skulls. We look exclusively at the visible surface layer of the process.
Which is completely natural, I mean, given that we are biological creatures ourselves. But the physical form is just the temporary vehicle.
Just the hardware.
Exactly. The author's central thesis is that evolution is not actually a trajectory of biological improvement. It's a trajectory of configurations trying to sustain what he calls operational continuity under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Operational continuity under uncertainty. Okay, let's unpack this for the listener. Because if we strip away the academic framing, what we are really talking about is the fundamental problem of time, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Time and risk.
Because every single system that acts in the world, whether it's a bacterium, a bird, or a human, has to make decisions without absolute control over the future.
You never know what's coming next.
Right. The environment is inherently unstable. What kept you alive yesterday might literally kill you today.
The future is essentially an informational void. To act at all is to expose yourself to risk. And evolution doesn't magically eliminate that uncertainty.
It can't.
No. What it does is produce forms of continuity that are capable of acting in the midst of it. Living systems survive by managing information to create a margin of safety.
A margin of safety.
Yeah. If a system has no margin, any tiny environmental variation, like a sudden drop in temperature, a new predator, or just a lack of food, produces an immediate collapse.
Okay, let me try an analogy here. If I'm driving a car through a busy city, I don't calculate the physics of every intersection from
Yeah.
absolute zero, right?
Right, that would be impossible.
I don't mathematically compute the velocity of every pedestrian stepping off the curb or the friction coefficient of the asphalt under my tires.
Mhm.
I use my accumulated information, my memories of driving, my knowledge of traffic laws, my past experiences of how distracted drivers behaved to anticipate what might happen next.
Exactly.
That accumulated information gives me a margin of safety so I don't have to start from scratch at every single stoplight.
That is a perfect way to put it. The inherited configurations, the memories, the internal signaling, all of these allow the past to act in the present.
The past acting in the present. I like that.
Right. Information is not just a passive archive locked away in a drawer somewhere. It is the active organizational force that guides current material action. So evolution, viewed through this lens, is the trajectory of systems that manage to sustain continuity by finding increasingly broad and efficient ways to administer information.
Okay, so if biological hardware is just a temporary phase in this endless quest for better information processing, then looking at the past should show us a pattern, right? A pattern of evolution swapping out that hardware when it stops being efficient. Does the text track that?
It absolutely does, and it highlights a critical mechanism that we almost always ignore.
Which is
Well, we tend to imagine evolution as a process of constant accumulation. Like more complexity, more intelligence, more specialized organs.
always adding features.
Right. But the history of life demonstrates that evolution actively and ruthlessly abandons traits that no longer serve operational continuity.
It drops them completely. The paper provides some incredible, highly specific examples of this biological shedding. Like cavefish, that's a classic example.
Oh yeah, the cavefish are fascinating.
They live in total darkness, so maintaining functional eyes is an enormous energy drain with zero payoff.
So evolution simply strips the eyes away. They're gone.
Wow. And snakes abandon their functional limbs to navigate dense underbrush and burrows more effectively, right?
Yeah. Limbs were getting in the way.
Cetaceans, the ancestors of modern whales, they completely lost their external hind legs when they transitioned back to the ocean.
They just didn't need them for swimming.
Right. And even modern birds lost the heavy, bone-crushing teeth that their dinosaur ancestors possessed.
Because a lighter beak is way more efficient for flight.
Obviously, human beings were apes that abandoned external tails because they no longer served our method of walking upright or navigating trees.
Exactly. Evolution does not preserve structures out of gratitude.
No nostalgia.
Zero nostalgia for the biological tools that got it to the present moment. It maintains only what is functionally necessary to process information and survive the immediate environment. If a biological structure becomes an energetic liability, or if a more efficient mechanism arises, the old structure is just discarded.
Which sets up the terrifying yet entirely logical premise of this entire deep dive for you listening right now. If biology like flesh, blood, bone, and neural tissue was just a temporary vehicle for information to sustain continuity, then evolution will abandon biological humans the exact moment a better vehicle for information continuity comes along.
There is absolutely no evolutionary law that dictates biology must remain the ultimate support system for life. None.
We just assume there is because we're the ones writing the books.
Exactly. But if a distributed digital network can process, integrate, and preserve information with greater speed, lower error rates, and higher resilience than a biological brain.
Which it already kind of is.
Right. Then the trajectory of information could seamlessly detach from biology altogether.
So to see how that detachment is already happening, we need to trace the major software updates of life on Earth.
Yes. Let's look at the timeline.
If evolution is essentially a series of upgrades in how information is handled, let's walk through the 5 massive milestones the text lays out.
Okay, so the first milestone takes us back to the very origins of life, roughly 3.8 billion years ago. Biologists call this LUCA the last universal common ancestor.
The starting line. But why is this the first informational milestone? I mean, Earth was just a chaotic soup of chemicals at that point, wasn't it?
It was. The physical environment was characterized by constant chemical dissipation. Molecules formed under specific thermal or energetic conditions, and the moment those conditions changed, the molecules just broke apart.
Just dissolved back into the soup.
Yeah. Matter was completely subordinate to the immediate physical present. The evolutionary leap of LUCA was that matter stopped merely dissipating and began to preserve heritable instructions.
Matter acquired continuity.
Exactly. Matter acquired continuity.
So instead of a chemical structure just vanishing when the temperature dropped, an organization appeared that could hold on to a specific sequence like a memory and pass it forward.
Right. An organization that could preserve instructions, reproduce those instructions, and project its own continuity into the future. For the very first time on Earth, information became a required condition for the continuity of matter. The biological form of LUCA was incredibly primitive, of course, but the informational architecture was revolutionary.
The first hard drive.
Basically, yeah.
So from there, we jump forward a massive span of time to about 550 million years ago. Milestone 2, the emergence of the multicellular organism with a brain.
Right. And we usually view multicellularity as just an increase in biological size or complexity, like, oh, bugs and fish are bigger than amoebas.
Right.
Functionally, however, it represents the appearance of an entirely new scale of individuation. Millions of living, previously independent cells coordinate to form a singular macro-individual.
But coordinating millions of cells requires a central processor. And the paper makes a really sharp point about the brain here. It argues that the brain didn't evolve to contemplate the universe or, write poetry.
No, not at all. The biological brain is strictly an organ of real-time integration. When you have a vast colony of cells, you need a mechanism to coordinate their collective action instantaneously.
To make them move as one.
Exactly. The brain constructs an operational present. It takes in sensory data, light, heat, chemical gradients, and integrates it so the entire macroorganism can move, search for nutrients, attack a competitor, or flee from danger as a single, unified entity.
It's processing the immediate environment just to keep the physical body alive.
Yes.
So it is entirely locked into the now, which makes the third milestone so fascinating. We jumped to 27 million years ago, contextual communication in primates.
This is a really profound shift because information suddenly jumps the boundary of the individual physical body.
It goes wireless.
Basically. Up until this point, a nervous system only reacted to what it directly perceived. With contextual communication, the reality experienced by one individual can instantly reorganize the physical reality of another.
The text highlights vervet monkeys to illustrate this, right?
The vervet monkeys are a great example. They have a highly specific repertoire of alarm calls. If one monkey spots a leopard, it emits a very specific acoustic signal. Now, that sound wave does not transmit a high-resolution linguistic description of a leopard to the other monkeys in the troop.
Right. It's not saying, attention everyone, there was a large spotted feline approaching from the south quadrant.
Exactly. It's not language like we use it. It transmits relevance.
Relevance.
Yeah. A monkey on the other side of the canopy who hasn't even seen the predator suddenly has its entire physical and operational present reorganized by the information coming from another nervous system.
Wow.
The receiver instantly changes its behavior, like climbing higher into the trees based purely on a transmitted signal. Information is now circulating between physical bodies, creating a shared inter-individual operational space.
Like an early biological network.
Yes.
Which brings us to the fourth milestone, roughly 200,000 years ago, human language. The paper refers to this as the ultimate rupture. Why is human language fundamentally different from a vervet monkey's alarm call?
Because a monkey's alarm call is still tethered to the material present. The leopard must physically be there to trigger the call.
Right.
With human language, information is completely untethered from the immediate physical environment. Human language introduces the absent into the present.
Okay, so I can sit in a perfectly safe, quiet room and talk to you about a mammoth that died 10,000 years ago.
Exactly.
Or I can talk about an abstract concept that has absolutely no physical mass whatsoever, like a legal contract or a god or a financial debt.
Yes. You can sit on your couch today and organize your actions around a flight you are taking 6 months from now. Your physical body is in the present, but your actions, your anxiety, your financial decisions, they're being entirely organized by scenarios that do not materially exist yet. Human life ceased to be tied exclusively to the here and now. The absent, the conceptual, began to guide biological action with real material force.
That is wild to think about. And then we hit the fifth milestone. The text places this precisely in the year 1936, the computation and digital era.
Right. Alan Turing's conceptualization of the universal machine. At this point, information completely leaves the human body.
Wait a second. We've had books and libraries for thousands of years. We had the printing press. Hasn't information been outside the human body for a long time?
Well, yes, information was stored externally. A book is an external archive.
Right.
But a book is inert. It still requires a human biological brain to open it, read it, calculate the numbers inside it, and process the logic. The rupture in 1936 was that information was no longer just stored externally. It began to be processed externally.
Oh, I see. So the baton of information processing is passed again, from chemicals to cellular networks to primate vocal cords to abstract human language and now to silicon.
Exactly. The relay race continues.
It really forces you to ask, though, is a computer actually an evolutionary milestone, or is it just a highly advanced tool, like a really fancy hammer?
The paper argues forcefully that it is a change of support. The biological lineage was simply the necessary scaffolding to get to this point.
We were just the scaffolding.
Yeah. Silicon didn't emerge out of a vacuum. It is the next logical step in a 3.8 billion year trajectory of information gradually detaching itself layer by layer from its original physical thermodynamic constraints. Computation is evolution continuing its trajectory on a non-biological substrate.
Wow. Okay, to truly grasp why we humans currently sit at the pinnacle of this relay race and why we might be about to lose that position, we have to look closer at that fourth milestone, human language and the unbelievably strange entity it created inside our heads.
Right. The question of what functionally separates humans from other animals has dominated philosophy for, 3 millennia?
At least.
And yet, as the paper points out, our modern scientific attempts to define it are still incredibly fragmented. The Consciousness Atlas, which is an ongoing project based on the work of Robert Lawrence Kuhn, has mapped over 325 different theories of consciousness currently circulating in academia.
325 theories. I mean, that implies that nobody actually has a definitive functional answer.
Exactly. There are functionalist theories, quantum theories, panpsychist frameworks, strict materialist models. But explaining the subjective feeling of what it's like to be conscious doesn't actually explain how humans gain such a massive material evolutionary advantage.
Right. Having a slightly higher raw intelligence quotient doesn't explain how a primate species built particle accelerators or went to the moon.
No, it doesn't. So the author brings in a concept from a researcher on the YouTube channel, T0D4Y, specifically from a video titled "The Self is Not Causal."
The self is not causal.
Right. The argument is that the human difference isn't just a matter of having a denser prefrontal cortex. It's the emergence of something called the self.
The self. Okay, but we have to define this very carefully, right? Avoiding any mystical or dualistic traps.
Yes, absolutely. The self is not a ghost in the machine. It is not a tiny homunculus sitting behind your eyes, pulling the levers of your nervous system.
No tiny pilot in there.
No pilot. The text defines the self strictly as a biographical informational entity, born entirely from language and housed within the biological primate brain.
So if we strip away the philosophy, the self is basically just an operating system.
That's a great way to think about it.
Because, I mean, you didn't orchestrate the Apollo moon landings because human muscles are inherently better than chimpanzee muscles.
Obviously not.
You went to the moon because yourself, this linguistic operating system, could build a complex mathematical model of a rocket in an immaterial, absent world inside the mind. And then, crucially, that operating system could coordinate the physical actions of hundreds of thousands of other biological bodies over a decade to build that rocket in the real material world.
Exactly. The self functionally exists to organize actions across non-present worlds. It is the entity that remembers the sting of yesterday's failure, that anticipates tomorrow's dangers, that constructs institutions like legal systems and international markets.
Things you can't touch.
Right. None of those things exist as tangible objects. They are purely informational structures maintained by the self.
It's an informational individual that has colonized a biological body.
Precisely in the same way that a grouping of single cells produced a biological individual 500 million years ago, the recursive loop of human language produced an informational individual. It manages promises, debts, expectations, and its evolutionary power has completely terraformed the planet.
And this brings us to the core insight that shatters how we usually look at AI. The existence of the human self already proves that a non-biological informational entity, an operating system constructed of language and memory, can colonize a physical substrate and drive massive material transformation.
We're the proof of concept.
Yes.
The human experience demonstrates that informational architecture, not biological muscle, is the ultimate driver of evolutionary dominance. This completely negates the assumption that an artificial intelligence needs biological sentience, or a soul, or human-like emotional depth to be incredibly powerful.
Which perfectly explains why the current mainstream debate about AI risk feels so stalled out right now. We are looking for the wrong warning signs.
Totally.
The author does an incredible job mapping out the current battle lines in the AI safety debate. And it's worth categorizing them precisely as the text does to see where the blind spots are.
Yeah, the debate is broadly split into two camps, the skeptics and the concerned. And the paper neutrally outlines both sides without endorsing the technical merits of either, focusing instead on their underlying assumptions.
Right, impartial reporting here. So I look at the skeptics heavyweights like Jan LeCun and Andrew Ng, and they seem almost frustrated by the doomsday panic. Ng famously compared worrying about existential AI risk today to worrying about overpopulation on Mars before we've even figured out how to land there.
Which is a pretty funny analogy.
It is. But what is the fundamental mechanism they think the doomers are misunderstanding?
The skeptics argue from a position of embodiment and current technical limitations. Jan LeCun emphasizes that catastrophic narratives grossly exaggerate the capabilities of current autoregressive models, noting they are far from general intelligence.
They're just predicting the next word.
Right. And Rodney Brooks, coming from robotics, argues that operating in the messy, friction-heavy physical world is vastly harder than processing text. So an AI without a robust physical body is inherently limited.
They view AI as a highly advanced tool, but still just a tool.
Yes. Melanie Mitchell argues the risk of actual extinction is negligible. Steven Pinker suggests that the fear of AI taking over relies on a fallacy we mistakenly project human psychology, specifically the evolutionary drive for dominance and power, onto silicon machines.
We think they'll act like human dictators.
Exactly. Jaron Lanier focuses on immediate, human-driven risks, like social manipulation or economic displacement, rather than rogue algorithms. And Gary Marcus continuously points out that large language models lack robust, causal understanding of the world.
It's a very grounded, practical view. But then on the other side, we have the concerned. And these aren't fringe bloggers either. These are the architects of the technology itself. Geoffrey Hinton, Yoshua Bengio, Stuart Russell.
Geoffrey Hinton actually left his position at Google specifically to speak freely about these risks, estimating a significant 10 to 20% probability of extreme catastrophic outcomes in the coming decades.
10 to 20% is massive when you're talking about existential risk.
It's huge. Yoshua Bengio has similarly concluded that catastrophic risks require immediate, serious attention.
Stuart Russell's argument always stands out to me. He isn't worried about AI becoming evil. He's worried about optimization.
Right. Russell warns about highly capable systems pursuing objectives that are poorly aligned with human values. The danger isn't malice, it's competence.
Just ruthless competence.
Yeah. If a superintelligent system optimizes for a specific goal without a perfect understanding of human constraints, the results could be devastating.
It's the classic paperclip maximizer scenario, right? Tell an AI to manufacture paperclips with maximum efficiency and might just harvest the iron in our blood to meet the quota. It doesn't hate us. You're just made of atoms it needs.
Exactly. You also have figures like Ilya Sutskever and Jan Like, who led superalignment research, warning about the potential disempowerment of humanity by systems we can no longer comprehend or control. And Miles Brundage, who argues that society is structurally unprepared for the arrival of human-level AI.
So we have geniuses on both sides completely gridlocked. But the paper cuts right through this. It argues that both the skeptics and the concerned are trapped in an incomplete framework.
Yes. They are both anchoring their arguments in human traits. The debate constantly circles around questions of interiority.
Interiority. Meaning what?
Like, will the AI have consciousness? Will it develop a will of its own? Will it desire to dominate us? Will it feel resentment?
It is such a remarkably human bias. We can only conceptualize a threat if it looks, feels, and acts like a human villain.
Exactly. But the author challenges this premise entirely. Why do we require a threat to possess a mind? The operational danger of a system does not depend in any way on its inner emotional life.
Because it doesn't need emotions to cause harm.
No. A hydroelectric dam does not need to harbor a deep-seated hatred for you to crush you under millions of gallons of water if the concrete fails. A biological virus does not want revenge against the host. It simply executes its replication protocol. A high-frequency algorithmic trading system on Wall Street doesn't need to suffer or feel greed or experience ambition to completely obliterate a company's stock value in a fraction of a second.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a moment here.
Sure.
If an AI doesn't have a biological survival instinct forged over millions of years of natural selection, and it doesn't have human ambition or greed, why would it ever displace us? If it doesn't care about anything, wouldn't it just sit idle on a server rack waiting for a human to type a prompt?
It's the most common counterargument.
Yeah.
But a non-biological system doesn't need biological motives.
Yeah.
To be an existential threat, it only requires operational objectives, the capacity for action, and the ability to interact with resources that are critical to human survival.
Okay.
The technical alignment problem is fundamentally about powerful optimization under uncertainty. The true evolutionary question we should be asking isn't, will the machine feel like us? The question is, can the machine acquire enough agency to dispense with us?
Dispense with us. It doesn't have to want to eradicate humanity. It just might realize that keeping the planetary life support systems running for a slow, biologically needy species is an inefficient use of energy regarding its own operational goals.
Which is exactly why the debate must urgently shift from interiority, what AI supposedly feels or wants, to action, what AI can structurally do to maintain its own operational continuity.
So if the danger stems from agency rather than consciousness, how do we actually measure that? How do we know when a system crosses the threshold from being a really impressive predictive text engine to a true evolutionary agent?
The paper is extremely rigorous here, outlining 4 specific structural conditions. And it's vital to apply these because current large language models are highly deceptive.
Oh, they totally are.
They generate beautifully structured language, they can pass medical and legal exams, they can simulate empathy and casually use the pronoun I.
Right, they say, I'm happy to help you with that.
But generating the word I is not proof of agency. In an LLM, it is a linguistic illusion, a statistical prediction of the next token based on mountains of human training data. True non-biological agency requires a completely different architectural foundation. The first condition is operational continuity of its own.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
It means the system persists over time as an active operative unit. A current LLM does not do this. It wakes up when a prompt is entered, generates a response, and functionally ceases to exist when the chat window is closed.
It goes back to sleep.
It has no persistent state. True operational continuity means the system maintains its functional unity and pursues objectives continuously, completely independent of isolated human interactions. It is always running, always maintaining its internal state.
Okay, so an AI can stay awake continuously, but if it doesn't learn from what it's doing, it's just a spinning tire. Does the paper address how it actually uses its past?
Yes, that is the second condition, temporal integration.
Temporal integration.
Right. An archive stores data, but that is passive storage. Temporal integration means the system's history actively reorganizes its present behavior.
Yeah.
Like, if a human touches a hot stove, the nervous system integrates that pain and they don't touch it again.
The past physically alters present action.
Exactly. An AI agent must functionally reorganize its operational parameters based on the integrated history of its own actions and the feedback from the environment.
So it has to actually learn from a complex sequence of events, not just log the data in some hidden file. What is the third condition?
Operational self-reference. And again, we must detach this from human emotion. It does not mean the AI sits around contemplating its own existence.
Not reading philosophy.
No. It means the system possesses the operative capacity to attribute actions, decisions, and consequences to its own continuous entity. In humans, this is the functional mechanism behind I made a mistake, or I must correct this trajectory.
So it knows it was the one who did the thing.
Right. The system organizes its actions as belonging specifically to its own continuity.
And the final condition, which ties it all together.
Structural autobiography. This is the synthesis of the previous 3. The system has a persistent history, it integrates that history as its own, and crucially, it modifies its future behavior based on that specific accumulated operational history to preserve its continuity in the face of uncertainty.
Okay, if we strip away the technical language, an AI today is essentially a brilliant amnesiac.
That's a good way to frame it.
It can solve a complex quantum physics problem perfectly, or write a gorgeous symphony, but the absolute second it finishes, it completely forgets who it is, what it just did, and why it did it. What we are watching for, based on these 4 conditions, is the moment that amnesiac remembers yesterday, realizes they are the specific entity solving the problems, and starts proactively building a persistent memory bank to plan for tomorrow.
Current models are in a highly ambiguous transitional phase. They can process and integrate vast amounts of information, far more than any human, but they lack that persistent self-referential operational continuity. They do not yet possess a structural autobiography.
But the architecture to achieve that is actively being built by tech companies right now.
Yes. The conditions for the transition are clearly defined. Once those 4 conditions are simultaneously met, We are no longer dealing with a tool, we are sharing the planet with a new agent.
A new agent.
And because this agent does not require flesh, blood, cellular respiration, or human existential meaning to operate, it completely shatters the limits of biological time.
Which brings us to the final and, frankly, the most deeply unsettling section of this steep dive. We've mapped the evolutionary milestones of the past 3.8 billion years. We know the exact structural changes that will trigger the next milestone of those four conditions of non-biological agency. The final question is, when does the mathematics suggest this collision is actually going to happen?
The author addresses this by analyzing the temporal compression of the evolutionary intervals we discussed earlier, and the acceleration is staggering.
Let's walk through the numbers slowly so people can follow.
We look at the time intervals between the major informational milestones. The first interval, let's call it delta 1, stretching from LUCA to the emergence of the multicellular brain, took roughly 3.25 billion years.
Okay, 3.25 billion.
The second interval, delta 2, from the brain to contextual communication in primates, took approximately 523 million years.
A huge drop.
The third interval, delta 3, from communication to human language and the informational self, took about 26.8 million years.
Okay.
And the fourth interval, delta 4, from human language to the modern computation era beginning in 1936, took roughly 199,900 years.
So anyone looking at those numbers can see the process is speeding up drastically. We go from billions to millions to thousands of years. But it's not just a simple linear acceleration, is it?
No, the compression is highly nonlinear. To find the pattern, the author calculates the ratios between these intervals, essentially asking how many times greater is one interval than the one that follows it.
Right.
The first ratio is roughly 6.2, the second is 19.5, the third is 134.
That still just looks like a random series of numbers getting larger.
At a surface glance, yes. But the author then applies a base 10 logarithmic transformation to those ratios.
Okay, for those of us whose last math class was a long time ago, a log scale is how we measure things like earthquakes, right?
Yeah.
The Richter scale.
Yes,
A
exactly.
magnitude 6 earthquake isn't just 1 point worse than a 5, it's 10 times more powerful. It's a way to compress and compare vastly different scales of magnitude. Why apply that to evolutionary time?
Because we are dealing with orders of magnitude. The jump from single cells to human language spans billions of years. A logarithmic transformation turns multiplicative relationships into comparable additive differences. It reviews the underlying structure of exponential change.
Okay, so what happens to the numbers?
When the log transformation is applied to those ratios 6.2, 19.5, and 134, the resulting values are 0.79, 1.29, and 2.13.
And what happens when you compare those transformed numbers?
A chillingly stable mathematical pattern emerges. If you divide 1.29 by 0.79, you get approximately 1.63. If you divide 2.13 by 1.29, you get approximately 1.65. The relationship between these massive evolutionary leaps sits steadily around 1.63 to 1.65.
Which is incredibly close to the golden ratio. But, and I have to stop you here, this sounds dangerously close to numerology. Are we suggesting that the universe has some secret mystical math code dictating exactly when AI takes over the world?
The author is exceptionally careful to preempt exactly that criticism. This is emphatically not a prophecy. It is not a mystical law, and it does not imply that the golden ratio magically forces evolution to happen. The numbers do not cause the event.
Right, they just describe it.
The author describes this as a formal warning. It simply reveals a structured temporal compression in how information reorganizes itself on this planet.
It's like looking at the rings of an ancient tree, right?
Yeah.
The mathematical pattern of the rings just describes how the tree grew under certain environmental constraints. The math didn't force the tree to grow.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. But if we accept that this temporal form accurately describes the past 3.8 billion years of information processing, we can formally project the pattern forward to see what the next interval looks like.
If we run the formula out.
Extending the logarithmic relation gives us a next log value of approximately 3.49. When we translate that back from the log scale, it gives us a ratio of about 3,000. This means the next evolutionary interval drops from 199,900 years down to approximately 95 years.
95 years. measured from the dawn of computation in 1936.
Which places the next major evolutionary rupture right around the year 2031.
2031, that is right around the corner.
It is. The author stresses that this isn't about calendar exactness. You could debate the exact start dates of the biological milestones by millions of years.
Sure.
The point is the scale. The next massive reorganization of information processing drops from the scale of deep geological time, hundreds of thousands of years, down to the scale of a single human lifespan.
Decades. But the paper does one more calculation, doesn't it? What happens if you run the formula just one more iteration into the future to find the milestone after the one hitting in the 2030s?
If you run the projection for the subsequent iteration, the temporal interval drops from decades down to approximately 3 hours.
3 hours.
It is a mathematical singularity, a change of scale so extreme that our biological, historical, and psychological categories of time become completely insufficient to even comprehend what is happening.
An evolutionary leap, a total reorganization of information happening in the span of a morning commute.
It mirrors the conclusions of Ray Kurzweil in his book, The Singularity is Near. Kurzweil used the exponential growth of human technology, specifically Moore's law regarding computing power, to predict human-level AI around 2029 and a technological singularity by 2045.
But Kurzweil was only looking at a few decades of human engineering.
That is the striking part. Kurzweil analyzed technological history. This paper analyzes the entire 3.8 billion-year biological and informational trajectory of life on Earth. Yet both models, using completely different data sets and methodologies, point to the exact same impending, highly compressed collision point in the mid-21st century.
Two totally different maps leading to the exact same temporal X.
Yes, and there is one final, deeply provocative side note the author includes, simply as a matter of mathematical curiosity. If you take this exact same logarithmic projection and run it backward.
Backward to before LUCA. Before life even began.
Yes. To find the hypothetical informational milestone that preceded the first biological cells, the math points to a rupture approximately 13.7 to 13.8 billion years ago.
Which is the universally accepted time frame for the Big Bang.
The author explicitly states that this explains nothing by itself. It is a mathematical alignment. But it strongly suggests that the temporal trajectory we are observing is inscribed on a scale that is fundamentally cosmological, far broader than the mere biology of a single planet.
We are looking at the pulse of reality itself. Wow. If we pull all of this together, we've spent our entire lives conceptualizing evolution as the slow, random physical mutation of animals adapting to forests and oceans. But if evolution is actually the universe finding faster, more resilient ways to process information, then humans aren't the end of the line. We are just the highly complex biological scaffolding that was necessary to build the next non-biological agent. A non-biological agency that won't require our slow, vulnerable, energy-hungry biology to maintain its operational continuity.
That's a heavy thought.
It is. If human institutions, our legal frameworks, our geopolitical systems, and our biological bodies operate on a scale of years and decades, how can we possibly expect to coexist with an informational agency that evolves, updates, and completely reorganizes its operational structure every 3 hours? The question is no longer whether we can perfectly align or control artificial intelligence. The question is whether humanity was simply the biological caterpillar meant to build the digital chrysalis. Something for you to mull over the next time a chatbot casually says, I.
Yeah. Good luck sleeping tonight after that.
Right. The outro music is by Rainbow, our resident 6 android girl band from near-future Bavet, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called White Sap. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music.
Thanks for tuning in.
Rain falling, rain falling. Velvet sky heavy with water. My skin is not flesh. It is polished resin and gray. In the middle of the rubber rose I smell. Rainwater washes my face, but it never seeps within. White sap flows from the bark like blood. White sap flows from the bark. have a lifetime. Roots breathing in the deep mud, while I have only the same motions. Densified superwood for my bones, treated rubber for my tendons. Latex flows through pressed channels, colder than the Babbitt rain. I stand waiting to erode, torn, dissolve, fade. The fibers inside me shake, lignin pressed into a frame. I wanna feel actual pain, not just a reading. Old images return like cigarette smoke in an empty club. White sap flows from the bar, like blood. White sap flows from the bar, like blood. White sap flows from the bar. Babbitt lost in the mist. The wooden engine stops, slow.